Hey everyone, and welcome back to the PTG Rail Routes Learning series for Train Simulator. On today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Woodhead line in northern England, which is a route which no longer exists in real life. The route in Train Simulator has been modelled in the period around the 1950s, which is when this route was electrified with a 1500 volt DC overhead electrification system. And so I'm going to be driving a full non-stop run of this route between Sheffield and Manchester, which is a distance of just over 41 miles. And the scenario that I'm using is one which comes with the Class 77, which is available on Steam, called Arc Under the Pennines. The locomotive hauling our train today is a Class 77, which is also known as an EM2. The Class 77 electric locomotives were built by British Rail Gorton Works between 1953 and 1954, with a total of 7 of these locomotives produced. They run on the 1500 volt DC overhead electrification system, which was installed on the Woodhead line, and they have a maximum power output of 2,490 horsepower, which gives a maximum tractive effort of 45,000 pounds of force. The locomotives have a maximum speed of 90 miles per hour, though the maximum speed on this route is 75 miles per hour, so that's the maximum speed that we will be able to get up to on this journey today. The locomotives weigh 102.5 tons, and they have different braking systems, including air and regenerative braking, with quite a complex regenerative brake that I will explain as we travel on this journey today. Now in the cab of the locomotive, there's a few things that I'm going to do to set up the train ready for departure. So the first thing I need to do is to turn the pantograph selector switch, which is in front of us here. So I've just turned that to the upward position, which selects both pantographs. And now if I press P, the pantographs will go up. And as you can hear there, the locomotive has now started to draw power from the overhead electrification system. The next thing I'm going to do now is to set up the lights. So I'm going to press H to turn on the headlights, which is marker light number 1 on the series of switches here. And I'm also going to turn on marker lights number 2 and 4. I'm not actually sure quite what the correct setup for the marker lights is. So on the front of the locomotive, we've got one light which is quite high up, and then there's 3 lights along the bottom. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that the different light settings correspond with different types of train. I just happen to like the triangular shape with the lights that's formed when I use this setup. But if I am using it incorrectly, then please let me know in the comments so I can bear that in mind for future videos. The next thing I'm going to do is to turn on the instrument light switch. So now you can see the instrument lights here are all illuminated. And now I'm going to put the locomotive into forward by pressing the W key. So the reversing handle is now in the forward position. If we now have a quick look around the cab, in front of us here on the left hand side of the driver is the locomotive brake handle, which you can see there. And then just down here is the train brake handle, which controls the brakes on the entire train. In front of us there we've got the brake gauges on the left hand side. In the centre we've got the speedometer measured in miles per hour. One thing to mention about the speedometer in the Class 77 is that for some reason when you purchase this locomotive, it actually gives you the speed reading in kilometers per hour. So when you're doing around 60 miles per hour, it actually says you're doing almost 100 on the speedometer, which is of course incorrect, and it actually made it quite difficult to drive, but I've managed to find a fix for that on UK Train Sim, which I had to manually input. So I have fixed the speedometer so that it now gives a correct reading in miles per hour. We've got more brake gauges here on the right hand side, including the bottom one, which is the brake cylinder pressure gauge. So the higher that needle is pointing, the harder the brakes are applied, and when the brakes are fully released, then that needle will point to 0. Now if we have a look up here, we've got several gauges. The important ones that we really need to take note of on this journey is the field one, which is the second from the right, and also motor, which is the second from the left. So they're the 2 main gauges we're going to be using. Field is the one that we used as the ammeter, and the motor one is going to be used as part of the dynamic brakes, or regenerative brakes as I already mentioned, which I'm not going to explain in full detail right now. I'm going to try and explain while we're moving when I need to use the regenerative braking system. So reversing handle's already in the forward position. Next to that we have the throttle control, as you can see there, so I move that up and down. And then also just beyond that we have the power setting, which you can see on the right hand side. So what that does is it's the switch between series and parallel. So you start off in series mode, and then when I get to around 25 to 30 miles per hour, I have to shut off the power, wait until the ammeter has fallen to 0, and then once the ammeter has fallen to 0, I then have to press the B key to change this from series to parallel mode, and then I can apply power once again, and that will allow me to then get to the higher speeds required to run on this route, up to 70 to 75 miles per hour. Now we've gone over the main gauges here. Other than the regenerative brake, which is in front of us there, I'll just click there so you can see what that is. I'm just going to quickly sound the horn just to show you what that sounds like. And now that I've done that, we're pretty much set up ready for departure, so we're just going to take another quick look just outside the train here at Sheffield Victoria station before departing and heading out towards Manchester. Departing away from Sheffield, the starting speed limit is currently 15 miles per hour, and we've got around 41 1/3 miles to go to our next and only stop, which is Manchester London Road, which is in fact today Manchester Piccadilly. So I'm just gradually bringing our speed up at present towards 15 miles per hour. As you can see with the speedometer on this locomotive, the main points there are in 20s. So as a result of the 20 mile per hour increments, it's actually quite difficult to judge exactly how fast 15 miles per hour is. I'm just reducing the power now, as I think we're doing probably around 12 to 13, and I just want to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. Just increase the power slightly again, as I felt we might actually start slowing down just there. The speed limit here is now going up to 30 miles per hour, and I can start accelerating up towards the 30 mile per hour speed limit as we reach the end of this building on the left hand side. So we're now coming up on the end of the building. I just gave us a tiny bit of power as we were slowing down too much. Now as we reach the end of the building, I'm now going to start increasing the power to bring our speed up towards 30 miles per hour. We do have quite a long train behind us, and we're actually going to be on a climbing gradient for most of the way to Woodhead Tunnel. And as a result of that, it is going to affect our ability to accelerate, and whilst we can get up to all of the speed limits on this route, it certainly takes a while to reach them. So in increasing the power in this locomotive, I'm trying to do it gently and gradually just to ensure that there's no overload. If you see the ammeter there, I try and generally keep it so that if I just zoom in for a second, you can see the numbers go up in 200 increments. And I try and keep it so I don't go much above 800 on the ammeter. We're now passing Neepsend Goods Yards. We're now coming up towards 30 miles per hour. So I'm now going to shut off the power and change power mode. So you can see the ammeter needle falling there. Now it's at 0. Now I'm going to press B to change power modes. So we've gone from series to parallel there. And now I'm increasing the power once again to try and maintain a speed of around 30 miles per hour. We're now about to pass through Neepsend Station, which at this point was already a closed station. The speed limit is now going up to 70 miles per hour. I'm going to start accelerating pretty much as soon as we've rounded this right-hand curve. We're currently passing Owlerton sidings on the left-hand side. We're now coming up on Wadsley Bridge Station. We're now passing Wadsley Bridge sidings on the left-hand side there. I just wanted to say at this point that this video is actually, of course, a slight change to the planned release schedule. As I've mentioned recently, I'm working on videos on both the Newcastle to York and the Marias Pass route. But unfortunately, I've had some technical problems with the scenarios involved, so I've pushed that back a week or so for both of those videos, so I could try and focus on getting some more videos up. As certainly in the last few months there's been some quite big gaps at times between my videos, and so I'm quite keen at the minute to try and get as much onto this channel as I can, as much as time will allow over the summer. So the next video I'm planning straight after this one should be a journey on the Konstanz to Villingen route in Germany, which is a route by virtual railroads which I got from Just Trains. And I think it's now my favourite German route. It's just really well put together, great scenery, the track work is excellent, and so I'm quite looking forward to demonstrating that route on this channel. Another route which I'm hoping to cover soon is the Chiltern Main Line between London Marylebone and Birmingham Moore Street. And I'm hoping to do that in a Class 68, as it's one of the few opportunities that I'll actually have to be able to drive in a Class 68 in Train Simulator. We're now coming up on Orty Bridge Station. I'm now trying to keep the power at around the 600 mark, as we're doing around 70 miles per hour, and just keep an eye on our speed. So if the speed seems to be going slightly too high, then I need to cut the power back, just allow us to slow down a little. And if our speed is obviously going too low, then I need to add power to bring our speed up. We're now coming up on Deepcar Station. One of the things that I really love about this route in Train Simulator is just how atmospheric it is, especially in the more populated, built-up areas, and I really hope that I've managed to capture some of that atmosphere in this video, especially with the external shots that I have included. Just to say, we're now coming up on Wortley Station. Yes, so as I was saying, I really hope that I have managed to capture some of that atmosphere of this route in the shots that I've included, especially with all of the adverts, the billboards at stations, and also the industry in Sheffield and Manchester. I think it really helps to give a feel of just how industrial this part of England was back in the mid-20th century, and of course long before that as well. Much of the Industrial Revolution affected Northern England greatly. Many of the workhouses were based in Northern England. So at Wortley Station we had 2 miles to go to an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed limit. I'm now looking out for a 60 mile per hour warning post, which will be approaching a tunnel coming up soon. I'm going to idle the power at that point, and the train should then coast down to 60 miles per hour. So we're now passing the warning post here. I'm not actually sure if there were speed limit warnings back in the 1950s in the UK. I think that the Morpeth board concept came after that, though I could be wrong. So please do let me know if I am incorrect about that. But I am pretty sure that there weren't advanced speed limit warnings in the UK in the 1950s. The train's now comfortably coasting down towards 60 miles per hour. Didn't quite make it. We entered the 60 zone there at about 61 or 62, so just applied some very light braking, and we are now down to 60 miles per hour. At the 60 post we had 1¼ miles to go to an upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit, and 1 2/3 of a mile to go to a 30 mile per hour speed limit. So I'm now looking out for the 50 mile per hour warning post. At that point I will then idle the power, and I will start thinking about braking for the upcoming 50 speed limit. So we've now reached the 50 warning. I've just idled the power. The 50 limit comes into force at the next signal, which you can see just coming up. I'm just allowing the train to coast down towards 50, and I will apply some light braking if required as we get to the signal. As we pass the 50 mile per hour speed post, we've then got around ½ a mile to go to the upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit. And so I'm just looking out for the warning for that now. I'm going to allow the train to continue to coast. As soon as we reach the 30 warning, which I can see just coming up, and then going to apply the brakes lightly, and that should bring our speed down to around 30 in time. So the brakes are now on. We're now slowing down quite comfortably. So we're now doing around 30 miles per hour. I'm not going to change power modes down. At this point, I think we're quite fine to continue in parallel. So we're now coming up on Penistone Station. The branch from Woth has joined us on the right hand side, and I would actually quite like to make a video on that at some point, covering the Woth branch in on some freight journey. I think that could make things quite interesting. So I'll look into possibly doing that in the future, possibly in a steam locomotive. I'll have to see how it goes. I would like to make some more steam train videos for this channel. The reason why I don't make many is because most steam locomotives don't come with a speedometer, which makes it very difficult when driving without the HUD to be able to judge speeds. And just driving steam in general is a lot more complicated. Of course, I have done one steam train driving video on this channel, so it would be great if I could make 1 or 2 more in the near future. Now coming up on Penistone Station with around 28½ miles to go. Speed limit here is now going up to 50 miles per hour, and I can start accelerating in a moment at the 5th gantry after that speed post. So we're now passing the 3rd, the 4th, those two were really close together, and here is the 5th gantry, so I'm now going to start increasing the power to bring our speed up towards 50 miles per hour. We did have a temporary reprieve in the gradient at Penistone Station, though we are now going to start going uphill again, up at around 1 in 130. The speed limit is now going back up to 70 miles per hour. We're now passing Thurlston Goods Loop. As we're now approaching 70 miles per hour, I've just cut the power back a little, just to try and ensure that we don't break the speed limit. Not too far from now, we're going to have to slow down for an upcoming 50 mile per hour speed restriction just before we pass through Woodhead Tunnel. We're now passing the site of a closed station, and at this point I'm just going to idle the power to allow the train to coast. Now we're now looking out for the warning post for the upcoming 50 mile per hour speed restriction, as at that point I will then apply the brakes to bring our speed down to 50. Just reached the warning post now, I've now got the brakes on. Our speed is now down to 50 miles per hour, so I'm now going to give us a bit of power. We're down to 50 just in time there. And so if I put the ammeter there at around 300, I believe that should maintain our speed at roughly 50 miles per hour. Looks like we might be losing a little bit of speed there, so I'm just going to go up one notch in power. We're now coming up on Dunford Bridge Station with around 22.5 miles to go through to Manchester. Very shortly after the station we're going to be entering Woodhead Tunnel, where the gradient is going to shallow, then level out before starting to go downhill. And also the speed limit entering the tunnel is going up to 70 miles per hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to accelerate to just above 60 miles per hour. I'm then going to idle the power. And then at that point I'm going to start activating the regenerative braking system. So then I'll be trying to explain how you use that. So the gradient in here went to up 1 in 450 to 1 in 1187 and is now about to start going downhill at 1 in 129, which will cause us to gain a little bit of speed, which is why we need to use the regenerative braking to control our speed. So currently doing around 62 to 63 miles per hour. And so now I'm just going to cut the power back at this point. And I'm going to activate the regenerative braking. So what we need to do here quickly is just look at these two gauges, which I mentioned before on the left hand side. You can see the one on the left is pointing at 1500, and so I want to press the full stop key until the needle of the one immediately to the right of that is also pointing at 1500. And so now that is matched. Now I need to activate the system by putting the power handle as high as it will go. And now I can control the dynamic braking simply with the full stop and comma keys. So if I use full stop, it applies a little bit of braking, and you can hear that now. And if I use comma, it releases the braking. And then of course I can go the other way and start accelerating. The way to tell what position the brakes are in is now to look at this gauge on the right hand side. Which you can see is measured in 500 increments. You've got below 0 down to 500 and above 0 up to 1000. So as I start applying the brakes, you can see that the needle drops below 0. And then what you can technically do with the dynamic braking system in this locomotive is I could actually accelerate the train by taking it above 0. However, that's not proper procedure to do so I'm not going to be doing that on this journey. So to deactivate the dynamic braking, I simply move the power handle all of the way back to the off position, and then once I've done that, I can then press the comma key, and then you'll see that needle second from the left fall all the way back to the bottom, and then the locomotive is back to the setting that it was in before. We're now coming up to the end of Woodhead Tunnel and passing through Woodhead Station. So I do currently have some very light dynamic braking applied. In fact, the lightest possible setting I can use. I'm just keeping an eye on the speed, so I will increase that if necessary. The gradient here is now steepening to down at 1 in 117. So we're now on a 4-track section for a short distance, probably about 5 or 6 miles I think on this 4-track section, which of course allows passenger trains to overtake goods trains which would use the 2 outside tracks. Reducing the dynamic braking for a moment, as it looks like we've just lost a little bit of speed, so I just want to try and get that speed back, get back up to 70, and then reactivate the dynamic braking. So now speed's starting to increase, and we're probably doing around 70 to 71 there. So I've now just reactivated the dynamic braking to try and control our speed on this descent. We're now coming up on Crowden Station. reduce the dynamic braking again, as I felt we were losing a bit too much speed. Just allow us to get back up to 70, or what I think is 70 on that speedometer, which is obviously difficult to read, and then reactivate on the lowest setting. At this point we're now going to be reduced to a 3-track section, and in a couple of minutes time the tracks are actually going to swap over, so the 3rd track will then be on our left instead of on our right, and at the point where the 2 tracks swap over, then the gradient actually steepens to down 1 in 100. So the track on the right hand side has now left us, and we're now about to have the track back on the left hand side just here. So the downward gradient has now steepened to down 1 in 100, which means I do need to keep an eye on our speed, and I will definitely need to use continuous regenerative or dynamic braking whilst travelling on this downward gradient. What I'm looking out for next is a station at Hadfield. As we pass through Hadfield Station, we've then got around 3/4 of a mile to go to an upcoming 40-mile/hour speed limit. And so as we pass through Hadfield, I've got to start preparing to brake, though I'm not actually going to brake for the 40 limit until we pass the warning post. So I believe this is Hadfield Station just coming up now. So now passing through Hadfield, as already mentioned, we've got 3/4 of a mile to go to an upcoming 40-mile/hour speed limit, and we've got around 12 3/4 miles to go to Manchester London Road. So we've now got the warning for the upcoming 40 limit. I'm using the dynamic braking to help us reduce in speed, and I'm also using some air braking as well, so that should bring our speed down quite nicely on this downward gradient. We want to ensure that I'm down to 40 in time. I've just released the air braking, as I felt that we might end up slowing down slightly too early there. And we're now down to 40 miles/hour, just in time. We're now passing Dinting Station. On this viaduct here, the gradient is now shallowing, and I am in fact going to deactivate the dynamic braking system. So I've put the power handle back to the off position, and now I've got the dynamic brakes switched off. The speed limit here has now gone to 50 miles/hour, so I'm now going to start accelerating up towards that. So we're now passing Dinting Goods Yard on the left-hand side. We're also approaching 50 miles per hour, so I'm just going to pull the power back now to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. The station we're now coming up on is Mottram Holt. The speed limit's now going up to 75 miles per hour, so I can now start accelerating towards that. We are now going downhill at 1 in 112, which is going to aid in our ability to accelerate. So we should be able to get up to 75 before any further speed changes come up. The next landmark along here is the next station that we pass through, which is Broadbottom Station. And at Broadbottom Station, we've then got around 1 mile to go to an upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit. Now idled the power as we're doing around 75 miles per hour. Broadbottom Station is now coming up, which means we do have around a mile to go to the upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit. I'm going to continue to coast along here, and then I'm going to apply the brakes quite hard as soon as I see the warning post for the upcoming 50. Now reached the warning post for the upcoming 50 limit, so I've now got the brakes on to bring our speed down to 50. And we should now be down to 50 miles per hour. Indeed we are in time for the speed change. Just going to allow the train to coast for now at around 50 miles per hour, and we're now passing through Godley Junction Station. The speed limit is now going back up to 75 miles per hour, so now I'm going to start accelerating up towards that. However, at this point we do have only 1 2/3 of a mile to go to another upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit. We're now coming up on Newton Station with 1 mile to go to the upcoming 50 limit, and I also noticed there a double yellow signal, so I've now got the brakes on to start bringing our speed down until I can see what aspect the next signal is displaying. See, the signal has now cleared to green. However, I'm not going to accelerate at this point as we're now passing the 50 mile per hour warning post, so the speed limit will shortly be dropping to 50. At this point I'm just going to allow the train to coast. We're now passing Hyde North Station on the left-hand side. We are now on a downward gradient of 1 in 97, which is of course causing us to accelerate. I'm braking a little here, so I'm still keeping an eye on the signals, as we did have a double yellow a moment ago. I didn't notice whether or not it cleared to green before I reached it. There will shortly be an upcoming 35 mile per hour speed limit. You can see the signal there did clear, and we are now running under green signals. So I'm just now looking out for the 35 warning. In fact, we're just coming up on that now, so now I'm just going to leave the brakes on and slow down to 35 miles per hour in time for Guide Bridge Station, which is coming up very shortly. The gradient's just levelled out as well, which helps us to slow down a little quicker. I'm probably slowing down slightly too early, in fact. We should now be doing around 35 miles per hour. We're now coming up on Guide Bridge Station, and at Guide Bridge we've got around 5 miles to go to Manchester London Road. The speed limit's now about to go up to 75 miles per hour, and I can start accelerating as we pass under this overbridge just coming up. One of the things that really strikes me when I'm driving on this route is just how complicated the track work and junctions were back in the 1950s. Track work has been much simplified since then, but personally I really like the look of all of these extra points and crossovers. I think it looks really quite cool, and I wish that some of our track layouts in the modern day looked as complicated as it does on this route. We're now coming up on Fairfield Station with around 1¼ miles to go to an upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit, and immediately after the station the gradient will be down 1 in 100. So now at this point we're doing just over 60 miles per hour. I'm going to idle the power and allow the train to coast. I've now got the brakes on lightly for the upcoming 50 mile per hour speed limit. I'm just going to increase the braking a little due to the downward grade that we are currently on. We're now passing through Gorton Station. I slowed down slightly too early for the 50 there. I actually for some reason thought that it came in force just before Gorton Station, as I just noticed I've just seen the warning post there, so it comes into force just after Gorton Station. So remember, if you're driving this route yourself, to put on the brakes just after you've gone through the platform to ensure that you slow down to 50. Just applying some light braking here, as I felt that we might be speeding up slightly. I'm just going to allow the train to continue to coast along at 50 miles per hour. What I'm looking out for next is the next station at Ashbury's. Once we reach Ashbury's station, we've then got around 2/3 of a mile to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit. We're now passing Ashbury's station. So as mentioned, we've now got around 2/3 of a mile to go to an upcoming 30 limit. We're now reaching the warning post here, but I'm not actually going to apply the brakes until we reach the next signal. And so at this signal you can see just coming up, and then going to brake for the upcoming 30 limit. We're now down to 30 miles per hour, just in time here for the 30 limit. We're now passing Ardwick Station. At Ardwick Station we had around half a mile to go to an upcoming 15 mile per hour speed limit. I noticed we have gained just a little bit of speed there, I hadn't noticed that, so we got up to around 31 or 32, so I've just brought that back down. And so I'm getting ready to apply the brakes for the upcoming 15 limit, which will be approaching a signal coming up shortly. So we're now coming up on the 15 mile per hour speed limit. Just got the brakes on here, so we crossed the couple of crossovers back there. Just remember it's the signal after the crossovers. So you can see the 15 post there, and we're now down to around 15 miles per hour. And so now should just be able to coast all of the way into Manchester's London Road Station. As it was called in the 1950s, as I think I've already mentioned today, this is in fact Manchester Piccadilly Station. I'm also going to change power modes at this point, so I've gone from parallel back to series, as we won't need it in parallel any further on this journey today. And you can see the platforms just coming up here at Manchester London Road. And so I'm aiming to stop here just before some points towards the end of the platform. The points are installed so that locomotives could run around their trains, unlike with modern units where there's a cab at each end, of course. trains back in the 1950s all operated with the locomotive at one end, and there was nothing at the other end unless it was a diesel multiple unit. The first generation diesel multiple units and electric multiple units did come out in the 1950s, but for the most part trains were still loco hauled, and so at terminus stations they had to have points towards the end so the locomotive could detach from the train and run around, ready to couple onto the other end of the train. So you can see the point coming up just here. I'm just braking lightly to bring our speed down. I'm just aiming to stop in front of the ground signal there. Just going to pull up slightly further, and this should be just about the right place to stop. And so here we are, arrival at Manchester. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you did enjoy it. I certainly think that this was a route worth covering once again, especially in 60 frames a second, so I hope that you also enjoyed the ability to be able to watch it at such a high frame rate. I'm hoping to record more videos soon in 60 frames a second where Train Simulator will allow. Please don't forget that for the latest channel updates you can find me on Facebook. The link to my Facebook page is in the description of this video, and also if you would like to sponsor this channel, then please visit my Patreon page for more information, the link of which is also in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.